Because living on alimony will be tough, I expect a raise in my salary. And make sure to give one to Andy too.
Even after signing the divorce papers, Karen's attitude didn't change. She said this with a bright expression, without a hint of guilt, and walked out of the house with just her belongings. What a ridiculous thing to say, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Does she really think she can be happy with Andy after divorcing me? I'm already certain that such a future is 1 in a million chance. Right after the divorce, Karen and Andy went on a honeymoon, and they returned to work 2 weeks later. Karen, smirking at me, seemed to notice that a stranger was sitting at her desk. "Your desk is gone. There's no place for you in this company anymore."
Excuse me?
Karen squinted, not understanding what I was saying.
What are you talking about?
"You're fired, and so is Andy." Karen and Andy stood there, speechless and stunned, as if they couldn't process what was happening. My name is Ken Smith, 54 years old. I run an auto repair shop. The shop was originally founded by my father, and I am the second generation to run it. Because my father owned land, he was able to build several factories. This allowed our company to introduce machines that small-town factories rarely had. At that time, there were no repair shops around here that could do sheet metal work, so we were in high demand. We still do business with some of the customers from those days. I went to a technical high school, and after graduating, I first got a job at a different auto repair shop. It's the kind of apprenticeship that's common when you plan to take over a family business. The place I worked was run by an old friend of my father's, and the boss there was extremely strict. He was an old-fashioned, stubborn man who would smack you for even minor mistakes. I once took a day off without permission because I couldn't stand it anymore. But the boss came to my house and hit me so hard that one of my molars chipped. I worked there for about 5 years before I finally joined my father's shop. A few years after starting at my father's shop, I met my wife, Karen. Karen is 4 years younger than me, and we met at a matchmaking party. At that time, I was desperate to have a girlfriend. My technical high school was all boys, and I was too busy during my apprenticeship to think about dating. As a result, I had never had a girlfriend and longed for one. I met Karen at one of these blind dates and was immediately smitten by her charm. So I pursued her relentlessly. Eventually, I became Karen's boyfriend, and 2 years later, we got married. Our marriage was smooth sailing. 3 years after our wedding, our first son was born. And 2 years after that, our second son was born. Life with the four of us was very happy. But around the time our sons became middle schoolers, Karen started acting strange. She began buying expensive designers' brand bags and shoes she never bought before, and would leave the house as soon as I got home from work. When I asked where she was going, she would snap back at me.
I'm just going out to eat with friends. What's the big deal? I've worked hard raising the kids, so I deserve to have some fun too.
I wasn't trying to be angry or accusatory, but every time I asked, she'd respond angrily. So I stopped asking where she was going. I could see her point, of course. However, I doubted whether she had really been working hard at raising the kids. Since they were born, our sons were looked after by my mother during the day. I would pick them up after work. Though Karen didn't work, she was listed as an employee at my company, and our sons were in daycare since infants. It was my mother and I who took them to and from daycare, so much so that when they were little, they mistook my mother for their own. Still, I couldn't say anything about it. And although Karen cooked dinner every night, She stopped doing even that once she started going out at night. I had no experience with cooking, but I taught myself by looking up recipes online. Every day after work, I would cook for our sons.
Why did you marry Mom?
By then, both my older and younger sons were gently suggesting that I get a divorce. Even they could see that something was wrong with our current situation. However, because I believed that children needed their mother, I didn't consider divorce and let Karen do as she pleased. It was about 5 years ago when Karen said she wanted to work at our shop.
I'm going to work to support the household. Hire me at your place.
When I heard this, I blinked in disbelief. Karen, who had barely worked before, suddenly wanted to work. When our sons were in high school, I once suggested she try a part-time job if she was bored at home. But she blew up at me, demanding why she should have to work, and I couldn't handle her. Since then, I had avoided mentioning work to Karen, so I was puzzled by her sudden decision. As I stood there confused and silent, she continued,
I'll start working tomorrow, so be ready.
"All right." All I could do was nod. The next day, Karen really started working as a clerk at our shop. It was perfect timing since our current clerk was going on maternity leave, and we were looking to hire someone new. However, Karen, who hadn't worked for decades, was slow to learn and not very capable at her job. On top of that, she had a lot of pride and hated being corrected, which made things difficult. The other employees couldn't be too harsh with her since she was the boss's wife.
This job is perfect for me.
Despite her enthusiasm, which made it hard to say anything, we reached this point. Karen has been working for 5 years now, but she still makes a lot of mistakes. The other employees have gotten used to it and now anticipate and prevent Karen's mistakes as they work. I feel sorry for relying on my subordinates completely, but I just can't bring myself to be stern with Karen. This year, we had a new employee join our company. It's rare for our shop, but he's a college graduate. The new employee, Andy Martin, is short but quite good looking. He speaks clearly and makes a good impression. Andy is working in sales for our company.
Hey, there's no way Andy can handle this much work.
Since Andy joined our company, Karen has become even more troublesome. I've known for a long time that Karen likes men. She once sent a message to a friend's husband, saying,
No one's home today, so you can come over.
It caused a huge scandal when the friend found out. The friend's husband didn't come over, so it ended up being just an attempt. But if he had, it would have been a full-blown affair. Even after joining our company, she would flirt with the young employees, and it seems Andy is her new target. You say this much work, but I think Andy can handle it by now.
That kind of assumption puts Andy under pressure. What if he feels too pressured and quits? Just reduce his workload.
All right, fine. Feeling exasperated by Karen's doting on Andy, I reluctantly nodded. I know my inability to firmly respond to Karen is a flaw of mine, but I've never been a strong-willed person, and I always believed in apologizing rather than fighting. Even with Karen's demands, I thought Andy would do his job properly. However, my expectations were too naive. Andy, spoiled by Karen, became increasingly selfish. Being Karen's favorite seemed to dull his sense of responsibility. Within 6 months of joining, Andy started talking down to much older employees.
Why can't you do this? You're useless.
Even when I tried to reprimand him, he was completely arrogant.
Do you think you can talk to me like that? I'll tell Karen.
I should have confronted Karen earlier, but I never expected Andy to turn out like this. Moreover, Karen and Andy often disappeared from the office together, and even I could understand what that meant. The two were having an affair. This was common knowledge among all the employees.
Boss, we understand it's tough, but you can't leave it like this.
Hearing this from my employees, I finally decided to hire a private investigator to look into Karen and Andy. I knew the investigation would definitely uncover evidence of the affair. It's not that I don't want a divorce. Honestly, I lost any love for Karen long ago, and both of our sons are married and out of the house, so they wouldn't oppose it. However, even without love, I still feel attached. Karen was my first girlfriend. In all my youthful memories, Karen is there. Maybe the investigation would prove their innocence. Maybe they were just going out to eat. But such faint hopes were cruelly shattered. The results from the investigator were damning. Karen and Andy went to a motel almost every day during work hours. There were numerous photos of them entering the motel arm in arm, and I struggled to hold back my nausea. The investigator spoke with a tone of disbelief.
They didn't even try to hide it. They were holding hands the whole time, and the age difference was so obvious that everyone around noticed the affair and stared at them.
I felt a mix of shame, embarrassment, and frustration that left me speechless. I then made an additional request to the investigator and concluded our meeting. When I got home that day, I saw Karen getting ready to go out. She was wearing clothes that were too revealing for her age, making it clear who she was meeting and where she was going.
What?
Karen glared at me irritably when I remained silent.
I'm going out for drinks with friends. It's my money, so what's the problem?
Karen lied without batting an eye. Did she really think I hadn't found out anything? With such blatant behavior, without a word, I slammed the evidence of her affair from the investigator onto the table. Karen was visibly shocked by my unusual behavior.
What? What is this?
I hired a private investigator to look into your activities.
What?
Karen stood there in a daze before grabbing the documents from the table.
What is this?
Seeing the overwhelming evidence of her affair, Karen glared at me, trembling.
I never thought you'd stoop so low. Spying on me like this is disgusting.
Do you not understand what you've done? You were having an affair. Karen's reaction was completely different from what I had expected. I thought she'd at least apologize first, but I never expected her to blame me.
So what if I had an affair? I married a dull guy like you, so you should overlook that much. Honestly, your only attractive feature was that your father was the boss. When you said you'd be the next boss, I thought you'd be rich, but that wasn't the case at all. It's been such a hassle for me, you know.
Karen's words brought back memories of when we first met. When I first met Karen at the matchmaking party, she didn't pay any attention to me. That changed at some point, though. It was right around the time I mentioned that my father was the company president. So, does that mean Karen really saw me as nothing more than a meal ticket from the beginning? I thought I might forgive you if you apologized right away.
Why would I apologize? And why do you think you can act superior and forgive me? I don't need your forgiveness.
I felt nothing but frustration towards Karen's blatant defiance. I felt pathetic for having any attachment to such a woman. So you're okay with a divorce?
Absolutely. I'm relieved to finally get rid of you.
Karen laughed loudly as she said this, holding back my tears of anger and sadness. I handed her the completed divorce papers. Sign this. I'll submit it tomorrow.
You're well prepared.
Karen signed the divorce papers on the spot. I wondered what my marriage had even meant, given how easily it ended. My lawyer will contact you later about the alimony. Make sure to tell Andy as well.
What?
Karen's expression darkened the moment I mentioned alimony. Did she really think she wouldn't have to pay alimony after such a blatant affair? Since the divorce is due to your infidelity, alimony is only fair. You can both stay at the company until you find new jobs, but please try to find a new job as soon as possible. My lawyer suggested firing them immediately, but I couldn't bring myself to be that heartless. Andy aside, Karen had been a housewife for years and would struggle to find a new job.
Fine.
Karen reluctantly agreed. I thought she should be grateful enough to cry, but it didn't surprise me that she didn't share that sentiment.
Well, I'm going to be happy with Andy. Pack up my stuff and send it to his place. And by the way, I expect a raise since living off of alimony will be tough, you know. And make sure Andy gets one too.
With a bright expression, Karen said this and walked out of the house with just her belongings. What a ridiculous thing to say, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. And I really wished she would pack her own things. But the thought of her coming back to the house was even more annoying. With a heavy sigh, I started packing up Karen's belongings. The next day, I submitted the divorce papers first thing in the morning and arrived at work a bit late. When I entered the company, my subordinates looked at me with pity. I quickly assessed the situation and looked around the office. Karen and Andy were cozied up together, smirking at me.
Look, here comes the poor guy Karen dumped.
Why did I ever marry a man like him? It's the shame of my life.
The two of them were talking loudly on purpose so that all the employees could hear them. Their behavior was like that of elementary school kids, and it gave me a headache. I'm the one who regrets marrying a woman like her.
We're going on our honeymoon for 2 weeks starting tomorrow, so take care of things.
What? Honeymoon? I was surprised to hear such words from Karen, and my voice cracked. I had just submitted the divorce papers, and now she was talking about getting married. Of course, a woman can't remarry for a certain period of time after a divorce, so they probably hadn't registered yet.
We've been living together since yesterday, so it's basically a common law marriage, and make sure to count these 2 weeks as special paid leave.
Special paid leave was a benefit at our company that allowed for long vacations like honeymoons. Of course, they both should get paid. However, that system is based on being legally married, so applying it to a common law marriage for their trip seems questionable.
And please give us a raise. We need to pay alimony, right? We can't afford that on our low salaries.
They say low salaries, but I think our company pays pretty well. We even give out more bonuses than most small to medium-sized companies. However, explaining this to the two of them seemed too bothersome.
You're so shocked about losing your wife that you can't even speak, huh? Poor you.
Andy interpreted my silence to suit himself and said that, "Do whatever you want." I spat out and went back to my work. It's convenient that Karen and Andy will be gone for 2 weeks starting tomorrow. I can get a lot of preparations done. And honestly, not having to see their faces anymore is a relief. And so, the next day, I began my preparations for revenge. 2 weeks later, Karen and Andy returned to the office looking quite refreshed. Their entire bodies were deeply tanned, indicating they'd been to some resort. Despite having to pay a large amount in alimony soon, they still managed to have such an extravagant vacation.
It was such a fun honeymoon. I can't believe we have to work again today. It feels like we're back to reality.
Then you can leave.
Huh?
Karen tilted her head in confusion at my immediate response. Andy, standing beside her, also frowned in bewilderment.
Sure, I'd love to go home, but the company must have been struggling without us, right? Andy's clients must be eagerly waiting for him. He's the star of this company.
The fact that Andy is the star of the company is far from true. When he first joined, he did work hard, but his performance declined steadily after he got involved with Karen.
And the office work must have piled up without me, the experienced one. I'm sure things didn't run smoothly at all. Wait, what?
Karen marched confidently to her desk, only to stop abruptly.
Who are you?
A different female employee was sitting at the desk Karen usually occupied. Karen looked around, thinking her desk had been moved, but there were no empty desks.
That's my desk. Move.
Karen reached out to grab the shoulder of the woman sitting at the desk, but I stepped in immediately. That's not your desk, Karen. She's our new clerk. Stop being so aggressive.
What? I wasn't told about any new clerk, and don't use my desk without permission.
Karen's shrill voice grated on everyone's nerves, and the employees looked on with irritation. Just yesterday, things had been so peaceful. Karen's presence alone caused such a disruption.
So where's my desk?
You don't have a desk. There's no place for you in this company anymore.
Huh?
Karen squinted, not comprehending my words.
What are you talking about?
Exactly what it sounds like. You're fired, and so is Andy. Karen and Andy were stunned into silence, unable to process what they were hearing. Watching them, I let out a small sigh. As the boss's wife and the new employee, you two openly had an affair and went on a honeymoon right after the divorce. That's ridiculous. I was willing to overlook it and not fire you both. But then you had the nerve to ask for a raise. I realized there was no reason to keep you employed. Not firing them when I discovered the affair was my biggest concession. I thought it wouldn't be right to fire Karen and Andy just based on my personal feelings. But watching their attitudes, I realized how foolish I had been to consider their feelings.
Wait, what do you mean we're fired? This company needs us.
Yeah, you can't just decide that on your own. You're just bitter because your wife left you.
The company doesn't need them at all. And as the boss, I have every right to make this decision. And I'm definitely not bitter. I thought these things but didn't say them out loud. It's useless to try to talk to these two, and they don't listen to reason. Nothing you say will change the fact that you're both fired. As of last week, you no longer have desks here. Your things are packed and in the hallway. Take them and leave.
Wait, we took out loans for our honeymoon. If we lose our jobs now, we can't pay them back.
Taking out loans for a honeymoon is typical of Karen's thoughtlessness. I don't care about your loans, but you'd better pay the alimony. With that, I showed them the official notice my lawyer had prepared. The documents were finally ready, and I planned to mail them today. Seeing the notice, Karen and Andy were stunned.
What? Andy has to pay $50,000, and I have to pay $200,000. There's no way we can afford that.
Karen shouted at me, louder than she had all day. Andy, looking at the notice, turned pale. It's not about whether you can afford it. It's about what you have to pay. If you don't, I'll go to court and have your assets seized. No matter how little money you have to pay.
What? I thought alimony would be around $1,000 at most.
I was speechless at Karen's ignorance. But I had suspected this. It made no sense that she didn't react when I first mentioned alimony. If she had known the usual amount, she wouldn't have taken out loans for a honeymoon. This amount is a bit higher than average. You can hire a lawyer to try to reduce it. If you can afford one, that is. Of course, I said the amount knowing they couldn't afford a lawyer. Even though the amount is a bit higher than average, considering what I've been through, I don't think it's high at all. Karen bit her lip in frustration and glared at me.
Why am I the only one who has to pay $200,000 while Andy only has to pay $50,000? Why such a big difference?
Do you really not understand? Karen's face stiffened at my response. She knew the reason. The amount spoke for itself. Well, you had more than one affair. So I asked the investigator to go back as far as possible. Those guys are amazing. They even found evidence from relationships you had years ago. I showed Karen the stack of documents. It was filled with evidence of her infidelities over the years. The first one dated back 15 years, around the time she started buying designers' brand items. Apparently, she had an affair with the father of one of our son's friends. Karen continued having affairs with various men over the years. Sure, she was attractive and popular with men. I was one of those fooled by her charm. The investigator mentioned that it's not uncommon to be asked to look into past affairs. But Karen's case was one of the worst they'd seen. Karen had been involved with over 10 different men. Looking at the number of people you were involved with, I felt like an idiot for not noticing. I always believed you cared deeply about our kids. Maybe that's why I turned a blind eye. But this, you've gone too far. The lawyer said that even with the amount being slightly higher than the norm, $200,000 was still low considering what had been done to me. Typically, the going rate is around $30,000 per person involved, so it could be seen as low. But honestly, I didn't care about the amount itself. I've also sent certified notices to all your past affair partners. They should be receiving them today or tomorrow, so you might be getting some calls. I said they might call, but many of Karen's affair partners were married, so their wives would likely be the ones calling. With all those wives potentially demanding alimony, Karen's payments could skyrocket. Among her affair partners was a former employee of our company. He was with us around the time Karen decided she wanted to work here, in sales. He's at another company now, but he was also married. Karen probably wanted to work here just to be close to him. What a shameless woman.
Wait, this is awful. Have you stopped loving me? You used to say you loved me so much.
Incredibly, Karen started to try and flirt with me. By the way, the last time I said I loved her was probably early in our marriage. My affection for her dwindled quickly when she showed little interest in our kids. Karen took my hand and looked up at me with pleading eyes.
Let's start over.
I didn't feel a flicker of emotion. In fact, I felt nauseous.
Karen,
Andy muttered, stunned by Karen's sudden change. Honestly, when they announced they were getting married, I thought it was some kind of scam. But it seemed Andy genuinely loved Karen. It's true, Karen has an undeniable charm. Otherwise, she wouldn't have had 10 affair partners.
I realized I need you, Ken. I've been with many people, but you were always the best.
Karen's attempt at flattery was absurd. It would be a romantic story if all those relationships happened before our marriage. But they all happened during it. Andy stood beside us, looking devastated. At this point, I almost felt sorry for him. He's probably a genuinely earnest guy. That's why he's so easily influenced by others, feeling betrayed by the person he thought was his soulmate, and left with nothing but a massive alimony bill. Must be devastating.
Karen, weren't you going to marry me?
Do you think I'd marry a short guy with nothing but looks? Can you pay my alimony? No. Marrying you would mean spending my life paying alimony. I'd never want that.
Does she even realize who caused the alimony payments in the first place? Her shamelessness is almost a talent. Andy was visibly crushed, and it was painful to watch. I felt like patting him on the shoulder and telling him he just got involved with a bad woman.
Have you already filed the divorce papers? If so, we can just submit the marriage papers again. I'll get the forms from the county clerk's office right away.
Unable to stand Karen holding my hand any longer, I pulled away. Karen looked at me, surprised.
What's wrong?
You even realize how absurd you sound? You cheated with multiple people, asked for a divorce, and now you want to get back together? How convenient for you. It infuriated me that she thought we could just get back together like that. How much did she underestimate me?
But I can't pay the alimony. You should pay it for me. Are you trying to ruin my life?
Exactly. I answered Karen's hysterical shout with a bite in my voice. After playing with so many people, she deserves to face her own personal hell. Money isn't everything, and this won't make me feel better. But a large financial burden is the most tangible form of revenge. Honestly, I don't want to see your face anymore, Karen. From now on, all communication about alimony will go through my lawyer. I've also had him draft a restraining order. Every time you try to see me, you'll have to pay $10,000.
What?
Karen looked at me in disbelief. For me, the no contact order is essential. I never want to see Karen again after today. Honestly, I even wish my lawyer could handle this conversation.
That's terrible. We've been together for so many years.
You misunderstand the meaning of together. You spent more time with other men than you did with me or the kids. Regardless, I'm not changing my mind.
No.
Karen collapsed in despair. In an instant, she faced a $200,000 debt. Her world must be crashing down. Beside her, Andy stood in shock. Andy, you might have been manipulated by Karen, but what you did is unforgivable. You will pay the alimony.
Karen,
Andy murmured her name like a mantra, lost in his own world, seemingly brainwashed. In the 2 weeks you were gone, work went very smoothly. Some people are just better off not being around. Karen glared at me, furious, as I delivered the final blow. Andy stared at the floor in a daze, saying nothing. So, you two are now outsiders. The discussion is over, so get out.
Fine, I'll leave for now. But if you ever want to get back together, just let me know. I'll always be waiting.
Just get out. I spat out, irritated by Karen's continued nonsense. Talking to her was infuriating because she just didn't get it. Reluctantly, Karen and Andy left the office. Finally, it was over, and I felt a wave of relief as I returned to work, exhausted. As expected, Karen received numerous calls from the wives of her affair partners. Each demanded a large alimony, doubling her initial amount. Unable to pay, Karen fell into massive debt, continually borrowing money to cover the alimony payments. She tried to latch onto another man, but it didn't work out. While she might have been popular when she was younger, Karen is now 50. Even if she retained some of her former charm, reality had changed. Rumor has it she couldn't even afford to rent an apartment and was staying at cheap motel with borrowed money. She's reportedly involved with loan sharks, and it might not be long before she's taken away by debt collectors. As for Andy, who was genuinely in love with Karen, he returned to his rural hometown. It seems being abandoned by Karen broke his spirit, and he's now recovering at his parents' home. The lump sum alimony was likely paid with his parents' help. Despite his poor judgment with women, his parents clearly loved him. I hope he recovers and finds a better partner. Since my divorce from Karen, I've noticed female employees talking to me more. On my birthday, I received over 50 chocolates and gifts, a personal record.
The female employees who held back because you were married are now coming on strong, you know.
One of the male employees grinned as he looked at the pile of gifts I received.
Boss, you might not have the best taste in women, but you're perfect otherwise. You're kind, handsome, great at your job, and have that mature charm. When we heard you were getting divorced, all the female employees were celebrating.
I never imagined this. Come to think of it, Karen was my first girlfriend, and she was the only woman I had ever been with. In other words, I had never known any woman other than Karen. I always thought I wasn't attracted to women, but maybe that's not the case. However, I'm 54 this year. I'm not ready for another relationship. And who would be interested in an old man nearing retirement?
We all want you to be happy, boss. You're only halfway through life, so enjoy it.
Hearing this from my male employee, I reconsidered. Halfway through life, what a great phrase. I don't know what the future holds, but I decided to live without regrets.